Catholic trivia question. How often do we hear the same scriptures, the same readings at Mass? How's that for a question? When was the last time that you heard these scriptures at Mass? How often do they repeat themselves? Every 3 years. You got that right. Now, for those of us who have enough life experience to remember the 1960s, before the mid-1960s, I see some of you shaking your head. Before the mid-1960s, we repeated the same readings every single year. You got the same readings. So in the 1960s, the Catholic Church decided, let's create a 3-year cycle of reading so that we get more scripture into our diet as Christians. So the next time that we'll hear today's readings will be in what year? 3 years from today? 2025. And the last time we heard these scriptures were in 2019. Boy, I remember the last time that we heard these scriptures because in 2019 we were remembering the 400th anniversary of the 1619 Project. Do you remember that? We were commemorating the 400th anniversary of the enslavement of our sisters and brothers of the African American community. A sad, tragic, sinful event. Enslaving other persons beginning in 1619 through 1865. Not granting them full civil rights until 1965. And even today, seeing how we as sinful human beings continue to treat others differently based on something like skin color. Imagine being enslaved. Our African American sisters and brothers were strong, resilient people. And while they were doing what they were being forced to do, they created songs. We call them Negro spirituals. They created songs to get them through, to give them hope. One of those songs, for instance, was how it was that in the same way that God sent a golden flaming chariot down from heaven to Elijah to take Elijah up to heaven, that God was going to bring them to God's self as well. Do you remember that Negro spiritual? Swing low, sweet chariot, coming for to carry me home. Swing low, sweet chariot, coming for to carry me home. How could their slave masters object to them singing spiritual songs, singing church songs while they worked? Those songs gave them hope that God was one day going to give them the reward that was theirs. Did you hear today's gospel? Today's gospel is of a poor man, Lazarus, who was not treated well by a rich man who had all sorts of means. He dressed in purple linen, in purple clothing, which was a sign of royalty back then, and fine linens, an indication of his undergarments. He dined sumptuously, had all sorts of wines and oils. He didn't lack for anything. And outside his door was a poor, diseased man. The dogs would even come and lick his wounds. Oh. Did you hear that in today's gospel? And yet, there's a reversal in the story, because that rich man who had everything he wanted in this world, and that poor man who lacked everything, what happened when they died? The rich man went down, and the poor man went to heaven. What in today's gospel is referred to as the bosom of Abraham. That poor man was close to Abraham and all the saints and angels in heaven, the bosom of Abraham. In fact, our African American sisters and brothers sang a spiritual about that as well. Rock of my soul in the bosom of Abraham. Rock of my soul in the bosom of Abraham. Rock of my soul in the bosom bosom of Abraham, rock of my soul. It expressed their hope. How it was that even though they were like Lazarus, that poor diseased man who was outside the door, who didn't enjoy anything of what that rich man had inside the house, that one day God was going to show a reversal of fortunes and take them to the bosom of Abraham, take them to heaven. What a song of hope. Today's responsorial psalm gives us that hope. Did you hear the responsorial psalm? The Lord hears the cry of whom? Of the poor and of those in need. And in today's first reading, the prophet Amos says, woe to whom? To the complacent. Woe to you who are able to help someone else in need, but don't. Who look the other way, who ignore them. Sisters and brothers, there's a lot at stake here. Which is why I love today's second reading. Because in the first letter to Timothy, the author of that pseudonymous letter says, Timothy, you child of God, I'm going to give you 6 virtues to practice. Righteousness, devotion, faith, love, patience, gentleness. And if you can live those 6 values, you child of God, then God is going to take you to God's self. Have you heard stories of Benjamin Franklin? The story is told that Benjamin Franklin focused on one virtue every single week. He said, this week I'm going to focus on this virtue. And every chance I get, I'm going to try to be better at this. And then he did that for a week, and then the next week he did a different virtue. Imagine for a moment taking today's second reading and cutting it out and putting it on your bathroom mirror and saying, there are only 6 virtues here in this letter to Timothy. I'm going to focus over the next 6 weeks, I'm going to focus on one virtue every week. This week I'm going to focus on love. And everything I do, everything I say, I'm going to focus on love for 1 week. And I'm going to go to the next virtue. Ooh. Patience. Patience. Lord, give me patience. I'm going to focus on everything I do and everything I say. This week I'm going to focus on patience. And then gentleness. And then righteousness. Imagine, sisters and brothers, in today's second reading we have a recipe for being a child of God, for achieving everlasting life. Let's live those values so that one day we too might be able to sing, rock of my soul in the bosom of Abraham, rock of my soul in the bosom of Abraham, rock of my soul in the bosom of Abraham, rock of my soul.